Welcome to part 2 of Kenya Beyond Physical Terms series. And today we'll be talking about the intelligences at play as far as the coming of the president of France in the nation of Kenya is concerned. And see, his coming is not, I said yesterday that the coming of the president of France in Kenya was a reality that is a manifestation of what has or had already happened in the spiritual realms. Remember that spiritual governments control physical governments, and physical governments are systems of administration for spiritual governments. And every individual you see is an arm, an element, a citizen, and an authority within a specific government. That is the reality of existence. That is the reality of human beings. Every human being is an arm of a government. Every human being is a government by himself. Every human being is an interplay of government. We speak about presidents. Presidents are also interplays of government, and the governments involved within the interplay of presidents. It's a government that has several structures and several systems of governance that go beyond the normal government systems of just an ordinary man. Because when we speak about presidents, we're talking about dominion. We're talking about dominions. Presidents are dominions. They are not authorities. There's a difference between authorities and dominions. So when we speak about presidents are dominions. So this is and was a visit by a dominion, and the agreement that they entered into was an agreement between dominions, and that is the highest form of agreement between the various different rankings of authority and the various different rankings of leadership and governance. So this was an agreement between dominions, and it is, as I said in the beginning, it is an agreement that had already been established in the spiritual realm. The governments of the nations, as far as the spiritual structures of governance are concerned, had already met, they had discussed, and they had established their own respective councils, whether this is in the positive or in the negative. They had already met, and it's not just the negative governments, because you have negative and positive governments. Negative governments had met, positive governments had met, and the agreements were reviewed by both governments respectively within their own chambers, because every government has a stake and has an interest in the specific agreement that our president has brought us into as a nation. So there is an interest. Spiritual governments have an interest with this nation, in the positive and in the negative. Now, the purpose and the interest of the spiritual government of the nation of France, now I'm speaking in the spiritual aspect, I'm not speaking in the physical aspect. The physical is just a manifestation of the spiritual. So the spiritual intelligence at play as far as the coming of the president is concerned, president of France, and the agreements thereof involved, have to do with the sovereignty of the nation of France. Of dominions is to maintain, establish, and expand sovereignty. So the reason why the president came and entered into the agreement that he entered into with the nation of Kenya, and the reason why our own president entered into that particular agreement, it is because of the sovereignty of the respective nations and the sovereignty of both nations collectively. Because as far as the spiritual realms are concerned and the policies of agreements within the spiritual realms, dominions enter into agreements so that they can establish and expand their sovereignty, which means that the nation of Kenya, as far as the perspectives and understandings and the spiritual influences that are administering their realities through the president of France is concerned, Kenya is strategic. Kenya is not just strategic, but Kenya is also instrumental to maintaining, expanding, and lifting, as it were, the sovereignty of the nation of France, and not only their sovereignty, but their influence as well. Why? Because as far as the spiritual realms are concerned, a nation has influence. A nation has influence, and a nation gathers influence in the ambit of its own sovereignty. If a nation is able to function sovereignly, and if a nation is able to function and maintain its sovereignty, because in essence that is the function of governance. The function of governance is to maintain, uphold, and expand sovereignty. If a nation is able to do that, then that nation ascends in the rankings of nations. You see, nations have their own rankings. Let us not be lied to. Nations do not have and do not exist in the same ranks as far as the rankings of nations is concerned. That is why when you read scripture, you come to places where you find we had nations that were ruling over other nations. We had kings that were king of kings. We had empires. Because throughout history, there are nations that have always been exalted above other nations, and that is a reality of existence according to the cosmic principle of first and last and last and first. There are nations that God exalts above other nations. Some are exalted above other nations in governance, that means in sovereignty. Others are exalted above other nations in giftings. Others are exalted above other nations in powers. Others are exalted above other nations through certain particular systems of existence and administrations of existence within the possibility of the nations. For instance, when we begin to talk about East Africa and we come to Kenya, what are we known for? What are we known for? We are known for athletics. What are we known for? We are known for M-Pesa. And that is an exaltation. That was a rise in the ranks. That was a rise in the ranks. You see, whatever a nation produces, and whatever powers a nation has been given, the administration of those powers, the development of those powers, determine the ascension of the nation within the structures of nations. So you find that the reason why Macron has come here, when the president came here, the president of France, is because that is one of his strategies. That is what he wants to do. And the reason why our president entered into that agreement, it is because he, in his own perspective, in his own mind, and in his own understanding, by the influences of the spirits that govern him and the spirits that have influence over him, he's seeking to maintain and establish the sovereignty of the nation. But his perspective may not necessarily be correct and may not necessarily be accurate. Why? Because the sovereignty of a nation is not measured by its technological or infrastructural developments. Yes, those are necessary, but in the realms of the spirit, the measurement of proper administration, the measurement of wise administration in the ambit of dominions is, are you able to uphold, sustain, and expand the sovereignty of your nation, of the nation that you've been given charge over? So you find that the agreements that he has entered into, these are agreements that have to do with technological developments. These are agreements that have to do with electrical developments and all that. There are other things, I was checking it out earlier. There are many other things involved in that particular respect. But if the developments, the infrastructural developments of a nation impair and hinder the expansion and the sustenance of the sovereignty of its own people, then there is a problem. There is a very, very big problem. Why? Because in the realms, that is not wise leadership. It is not wise leadership at all. It is not wise leadership. Why? Because the purpose of wisdom, and one of the functions of wisdom, is to give sovereignty. Sovereignty is a gift of wisdom, and sovereignty is a gift from wisdom, and sovereignty is a function of wisdom. So that means that Whenever dominions interact, they are looking to their own interest. They are looking to their own interest. Each is coming with their own respective interests. Why? Because their concern is the sovereignty of their own people. It's the sovereignty of their own people. And this is where presidents, dominions make mistakes, because oftentimes or not, dominions enter into agreements for infrastructural and technological developments at the expense of sovereignty. At the expense of sovereignty. And sovereignty cannot be bought. Sovereignty cannot be bought. So you find that with what our president has done, the nation of France is seeking its own interest. So in order for the nation of France to administer its own interests, there is a trade that must take place. There is a trade that must take place. You see, dominions and spirits, the interactions of spirits, is within the interests of the spirits themselves and the interests of the assignment of the spirits. Spirits interact from their consecrations and in their consecrations. And you see, consecrations determine interests. So you find that what is happening now is that the president of France has come and he's seeking his own interests, the interests of his people, the interest of his nation. And I mentioned earlier that has to do with strategy. And whenever nations form an alliance in whatever capacity, strategic wisdom is one of the administration between the nations, and is one of the administrations of one or both of the nations. The reason why I said one or both of the nations is because oftentimes or not, it is one nation that carries a greater and higher and more profitable strategy compared to another. That is the reality, and you find that oftentimes or not, the one that is benefiting the most is the one that is seeking a higher strategy. And higher strategies are within the ambit of the visions of dominions. You see, what a dominion wants to achieve and the fidelity of the dominion within the functionaries of his vision and in the ambit of the operations of their vision, that is what determines the level, the degree, and the rank of their strategic wisdom. And if you observe the agreements very well, you find that France has a higher strategic wisdom compared to us. Because it's a matter of infrastructural developments, but if infrastructural developments and technological developments mean the compromise of sovereignty, then that means that the nation of France has a say and will have a say in some of our administrative functions, that is, in some of our government's administrative functions. Why? Because having entered into agreement with this nation of ours, the nation has become strategic to their vision. Nations don't just enter into agreements or into alliances without having a vision. There's somewhere the president of France is leading France. And Kenya is instrumental to that as far as the agreement they have entered into is concerned. It's a trade of interests, and not only a trade of interests, it is also an integration of functionalities within the ambit of the vision of this nation and the vision for this nation and the vision for the nation of France and the vision in the nation of France. And if there is going to be any conflict between these two nations. The conflict will rise because of sovereignty. Remember, the whole point of this agreement is to expand, to maintain, and to establish the sovereignty of the nation of France. That is the whole point. Alliances between nations are for the purpose of sovereignty. They are not for the purpose of anything else. They are for the purpose of sovereignty. So that tells you that as far as the sovereignty of this nation of ours is concerned, the sovereignty of our nation, as far as the protocols of spirits are concerned, the sovereignty of our nation has already been compromised. Why? What is the role? What is the role of France in our vision? What is the role of France in our dream? What is the role of France in the ambit of the operations of the throne of this nation, and in the ambit of the operations of the influences of the spirits that have been appointed for this nation? Is this a two-sided agreement, or is it a one-sided agreement? Let me tell you this. You see, in the realms of the spirit, what is valued most is not physical and infrastructural development. What is valued most is sovereignty. What is valued most is sovereignty. The purpose and the administration of the spirits that have been given charge over this nation of ours is sovereignty. Their concern is the sovereignty of the nation. Their concern is the independence of the nation. Talking about the independence of the nation, it is in the ambit of the nation being able to facilitate and administer its own governance. And this has a lot to do with the cosmic law of sovereignty, because there is a law, there is a universal law within the ambit of the cosmic laws. And we have about 13 to 14 universal laws. And these universal laws, spirits function through these universal laws. And spirits cannot break these laws. And when they break these laws, they end up in trouble with other hierarchies of spirits upon which and in which these other spirits are functioning in and are functioning under. So they value sovereignty. Their interest over this nation is its own sovereignty. So that means that even the interest of the leader of the nation should be the nation's sovereignty. And when our president is entering into agreements with other nations, should be entering in agreements with nations for the sake and purpose of expanding, maintaining our sovereignty. The sovereignty of the nation is the utmost consideration in the strategies of nations. So now we understand that he has come, and the reason he's come, the reason why even the spirits gathered, it is for the sole purpose of the sovereignty of this particular nation of ours. And you see, sovereignty is made manifest through the institutionalization of laws, because sovereignty is preserved by laws. The laws that a nation implements become the hinges upon which the sovereignty of that particular land is dependent on. The sovereignty of a people rides in cosmic laws, but it also rides and hinges on and in the constitutional law that has a lot to do with the laws that the nation itself develops for itself. And per the ordinations of becoming and per the ordinations of the destinies of men and the destinies of nations, the constitutional law of a land belongs and functions under and in the cosmic universal, the cosmic law of becoming. That means that as we become and the more we become as a nation, our constitution will be reviewed. It has to be reviewed. The laws of men are becoming. As men become, so do their laws. So there is a consistent review of laws. And laws are meant to be reviewed for the purpose of amplifying sovereignty, and for the purpose of establishing sovereignty, and for the purpose of maintaining sovereignty. And this is where I bring in an interesting point. You see, if may the Lord help you understand, if the nation of France has an interest and the law of our nation prevents them from administering that interest, do you not think and do you not suppose that the interest of that nation, of the nation of France in Kenya, will mean that our constitution must change so that it can accommodate the nation of France? As a matter of fact, the agreement itself contains certain particular compromises already. Why? Because it is a matter of the highest interest is in the side of France. That's what the highest interest is in the side of France. It's not in our side. Spiritually speaking, also, it is in that particular respect. It is not within our interest. There is an interest, but there are rankings of interests. But when you find that now, because of what we are getting, which seemingly has a lot to do with even the creation of employment, and all that kind of stuff, and that is what is being looked at. That is what is being looked at the most. You find that this can be done, yes, but it can be done and be achieved at the expense of the sovereignty of the land. Because when nations have a stake in other nations, the administrations of nations become subject to the influence of other nations. Which means that the gods, the lords, and the spiritual entities that have been assigned to France, they have, through this agreement, they have been given access to the nation. You see, agreements between dominions in physical terms is agreement between spiritual authorities and spiritual dominions. It is an agreement between spiritual governments. And remember, a nation has different governments. There are positive governments and there are negative governments. So if an agreement is in the negative aspect of reality, that tells you, and by the negative aspect of reality, I mean if an agreement threatens, limits, and interferes with the sovereignty of a nation, that tells you that the agreement is between the negative forces of governance and not the positive forces of governance. And the reason for that is because, you see, negative spirits have an interest in this nation. There are negative spirits that have been assigned to this nation. There are negative spirits that have been assigned to France. They have sat, they have met, as I said in the beginning, they have analyzed. And it's not simply a matter of analyzing territories. It's a matter of analyzing the possibilities within the current state of consciousness of the nation, and within that particular reality of the state of the consciousness of the nation, there is the examination of the immediate state of consciousness of the nation. And there is an examination and consideration of the state of awareness as far as the immediacy of being is concerned. Why? Because the possibilities of a nation are contained in the ambit of the evolutionary process of the nation. And the evolution of a nation determines the shifts and changes of its laws and of its structures. And laws and structures shift and change towards vision. But let me say this: woe unto us if the vision of our president lacks originality. Woe unto us if the vision of our president is only infrastructural development. Because the vision of a people and the vision of spirits for nations is sovereignty. All these other things are offshoots of sovereignty. So the structures and systems and alliances that our nation should be entering into and our nations should be developing are structures and systems that amplify our sovereignty. They're structures and systems that will enable our nation to function towards higher dimensions of its already existing sovereignty. Now, the union of nations, the agreements of nations, will always result to the formation of structures and systems. And structures and systems are playgrounds for spirits. So the structures and systems that are formulated when two nations come together, they are formulated to give access to spirits. I want us to understand that. Structures formed by the alliance of nations and by the alliance of dominions are for the operation of spirits. And therefore the administration of the judgments, rulings, and intentions of spirits. Spirits do not operate outside the context of structures and systems. And before a spirit functions and operates and manifests, it must first create a system through which it can function. It must create a system through which its power can flow. Why? Because power flows through structures and systems. It must create a system through which and in which its potencies can be activated. Why? Because potencies are activated through structures and systems. So the number one concern of spirits is, how do I create a system that can help me administer my vision? How do I create a system that can help me realize my sovereignty? Why? Because spirits are also seeking sovereignty. Spirits seek sovereignty. Let me repeat that. Spirits seek sovereignty. The intentions of spirits with nations and in nations is the development of systems that will enable them to experience some degree and some level of sovereignty. This is because systems and structures are the pillar. Systems and structures are the pillar of sovereignty. So the systems and structures that are being formed and are being formulated and have been formulated by this agreement, it is so that particular spirits can have sovereignty. And when we speak about sovereignty, sovereignty is measured by the ability of a spirit to realize its potential. And spirits are always seeking for systems, and they are always seeking to develop systems that can help them. manifest and realize their infinite possibilities. So in the structures of spirits and in the governance of spirits, this agreement carries the possibility of having certain spirits within and from that respective nation to express itself and to express themselves. Spirits always seek expression. The destiny of spirits is in systems and structures, and there are dimensions of their own destiny that they cannot realize unless they exist within the context of specific structures and specific systems. Now, if it is in the negative, woe unto us. If it is in the positive, hallelujah. But as to whether or not this is in the positive or in the negative, it is up to you. But if the statement of the president of France is anything to go by, there's a particular statement he made about recolonization. If that statement is anything to go by, then we all know in which particular aspect of reality these systems are in. So one of the other things is that whenever an alliance between nations has come into play and has come into existence, as I've mentioned already, that there must be a shift and there must be a creation of systems that will accommodate the function of the alliance. And that creation carries with it a possibility of shifts. And they are not just shifts of structures within the alliance itself, but they are also shifts and structures that will facilitate and expand the alliance. The interest of nations in nations grow. It grows. It grows. Why? Because the strategies of sovereignty always have expansion as a function. The strategies of sovereignty always have expansion as a function. And expansion carries with it the intelligence of review and the intelligence of legal constructions. When we talk about legal constructions, we're talking about laws. Another thing we have to grasp is that the formation of alliance between dominions and in nations and with nations, it means that when certain administrative functions of a nation, for instance, the governmental administrations of this nation of ours, that as our governments run and administer their own respective realities in the ambit of the vision that the leader of this particular nation has, that the nation of France will have an ear and will have an eye in the administrations. Why? Because they have to seek and look out for their own interests. Which means that the considerations of the administrations of our government have expanded, that they now have to consider France. They have to consider the interest of France. Which means that in certain terms, France has become a consultating government. Because governments consult with governments, and where alliances have been formed and have been forged, those alliances carry a consultation dimension. Why? Because of interests. Interests matter. So the interests of France in this nation and in this nation, according to the alliance between the nation and between the two nations, it means that France has a say. France has a say in the administrations of our government. Because the strategy of France the strategy of France in the ambit of expanding its sovereignty includes the nation of Kenya. And because it includes the nation of Kenya, what that means is that the administrations of these nation of ours, if they at any particular moment in time threaten the interests of France, then France has to speak and has to say, hey, but that goes against the agreement that we have. That will cause a compromise of the alliance that we have formed. That will cause a compromise of the administrations of the structures and systems that we have established. Because understand this, and I repeat again, whenever an alliance is formed between nations, there must be a reconstruction of systems and structures so that the interest, the agreed upon interest, can be administered. So that tells you that as far as our laws are concerned, as far as our realities of administration and realities of vision are concerned, there is a new aspect of consideration. And that puts our sovereignty in a place of compromise. Why? Because now we must not only, the good of the nation must not only be considered, but the good of another nation must also be considered. And what happens when there is a conflict of interest? What happens then? There is a song I've been seeing on TikTok, and it says that whoever feeds you control you. Whoever feeds you controls you. Now that is a telltale in and of itself, that whoever sustains your existence controls you. So that means that in whatever reality of growth and in whatever reality of feeding that we have entered into with France, to that degree, the nation has an influence in our sovereignty. And therefore, our sovereignty has been compromised. That's the reality. And it has not been compromised just physically, it has been compromised spiritually as well. Because agreements between nations are spiritually binding. In essence, they flow from the realm of spirits. In truth, they are manifestations of agreements between spirits, and spirits operate with jurisdiction. The destiny of spirits is locational. And spirits cannot go where they do not have jurisdiction. So this agreement gives jurisdiction to certain spirits to come and enter this nation and review this nation and access this nation. You see, one of the points of the agreement was that there's going to be the sharing of intelligence. You see, the sharing of intelligence is something that is not only in the ambit of physical governance, but it is also something that is in the ambit of spiritual governance, which means that there are certain centers, spiritually speaking, that will be established in this nation for the sole purpose of information coordination. You see, the spiritual realm has systems of intelligences and systems of communication and centers of communication. So that means that we are now looking at an establishment of a center of communication as far as the nation is concerned. We're looking at the establishment of spiritual centers, of surveillance. This is because, you see, whenever the destiny of an individual is perceived, surveillance is the offshoot of that particular perception. So whenever the destiny of a nation is perceived, surveillance is the offshoot of that particular perception. And after surveillance, what follows next is infiltration. And after infiltration, what follows next is influence. And after influence, what follows next is compromise. And after compromise, what follows next is the limitation of sovereignty. Now, the limitation of sovereignty is a reality that is administered in the ambit of laws. Why? Because the sovereignty of a people and the sovereignty of a nation is within its law. And there are different types and different kinds of laws, including now the laws of agreement between nations. And the laws of agreement between nations are for the interests, respective interests of the nation, and not only the respective interests of the nation, but for the respective visions of the nations. And they must find a point of agreement, and the point of agreement means that there is a trade. And when you're talking about trade, we must understand that spirits trade with energies. That is why you find that within the agreement there is a certain particular amount of money that is being injected into the Kenyan economy by France. And what is that? That is an energy that is being injected into our system. Why? Because money represents energy. Money is an energy system. Money is a spiritual energy system. Money is a representation of your strength. It's a representation of your energy. So there's an energy that is being injected into our system. And the currency of a nation carries the structures of that nation. Now this is the reality as far as the spiritual things are concerned, as far as spiritual realities are concerned. So it is not simply just a matter of money, but it's also a matter of a system. It is a system that is being invested in us. It is an influence that is being brought into the land. It is an influence that is being brought into the land. Let us not be fooled at any moment in time to think that, the agreement is only in the ambit of the interests of this nation. No, the agreement is also in the ambit of the nation of France and the sovereignty of that particular nation and the expansion of the sovereignty of the nation. And there are several things that I want to mention that, and these several things have to do with how governments are overtaken, and not only how governments are overtaken, but how alliances are formed. You see, alliances are formed, number one, through food. You've heard about food aid. Food aid, that has a lot to do with the formation of alliances. And that's why you find that in Scripture, when Adam and Eve fell, Scripture says that the woman saw that the fruit was good for food. Food is one of the systems that is used to cause a compromise, and not only a compromise, but to overthrow governments and those who establish governments. So talking about food aid, that's a reality that comes in. And we also begin to talk about beauty, on the glory of a people and the glory of a land. The glory of nations physically speaking, and the glory of nations spiritually speaking, is also one of the things that is used to overthrow, to overrun, and to establish governments. Scripture says that the woman saw that the fruit was good for food. So the government of man was usurped and overtaken because of beauty and food. Because of beauty and food. Now, notice something interesting, that as far as the agreements are concerned, there is something to do with infrastructural developments, the transportation system. That we should have a beautiful transportation system, an effective transportation system. And we are shipping not only labor, but also shipping structures and systems, because every nation has its structures and systems. So we're also shipping structures and systems, and the beauty of a government is in its structures and systems. So you find we're not only shipping structures and systems, we're actually shipping beauty. So beauty is part and parcel of the agreement between the presidents, between dominions. Then you find the other thing has to do with, now this is the third one, wisdom. Scripture says, and when the woman saw that the fruit was desirable to make one wise, she perceived she could become wise. It is in the pursuit of wisdom that the government of man was usurped. Now, notice what I said about in the beginning. I talked about how the perspectives, the judgments, and the wisdom that the two presidents have, that is what caused them to enter into this particular agreement. So they've come to this agreement through a certain wisdom, and the wisdom that they have entered in, the wisdom that they have formed this agreement in, it is a wisdom that establishes, and it's a wisdom that has the possibility and potentiality of compromise and the possibility and potentiality of overthrowing. Now, again, sacrifices. We begin to talk about sacrifices as well. You know that when we talk about sacrifices, that has to do with that the fact that when two people come together and they are forming an agreement, that particular agreement will be characterized by a compromise. That agreement will be characterized by a sacrifice, especially if one is gaining more than the other. There has to be a sacrifice. There are things that the lesser has to sacrifice. When an agreement is between a greater and a lesser, the lesser one has to sacrifice something so that the greater one can help. This is what happens. Remember, I told you spirits trade with energies. This is what happens. When the lesser is coming to the greater for help, there are protocols to be followed, and one of those protocols is the protocol of sacrifice. Now, this is an agreement between spirits. And alliances between spirits also require sacrifice. So the question is, what has been given up? What has been sacrificed? Our sovereignty has been sacrificed. The totality of our sovereignty has been sacrificed. Again, money. Number 5, we talk about money and the administration of money and how money is used to overthrow, and not only to overthrow but to also establish. We all know that authority can be purchased, dominion can be purchased, and we've seen that the president of France wants to inject a certain particular amount of money into our economy. He's injecting some money into it, injecting some money. So you see, what is being brought into play is an energy system. Remember, I say that money is an energy system. So it's a foreign energy system being brought into play within our economy. And that energy system carries the intentions of the president. It carries the reality of his intentions with this nation. That is President Macron. It carries his intentions with this specific nation. So it's an intention that is being injected into our economy. It's an intention, it's an energy system. It's an energy system with possibilities. It's an energy system with powers. It's an energy system with potencies that is being injected into our nation. And again, number 6, we talk about laws. And I've already mentioned things about laws. I've talked about how that when they came into an agreement, that agreement has clauses of governance. Agreements require systems of governance. And we're talking about laws, because laws are structures of governance. So there are certain specific laws. And remember what I said, that if at any moment in time, there's going to be the development of certain laws that will cause an issue, or that will collide with the interests of France with this nation and the vision of France in this nation, which is to expand its sovereignty, there will be an examination of laws. It's either we stick to our laws or we shift and alter our laws if the interest threatens the expansion of the sovereignty of France. Then again, we talk about location. This is the seventh, and I mentioned and I've said that destinies are locational. Destinies are locational. So for France to come into this nation, it is because the location of our nation is strategic. That's number one. Number two, it is because the development and growth of our nation is strategic and beneficial to them. It is beneficial to them. Agreements don't just happen overnight. Agreements happen because there has been reviews. Agreements happen because there is an alignment of interests. And as I said, not every agreement has equal beneficiaries. Not every agreement has equal beneficiaries. This agreement, this is my personal belief. I do not believe it has. It is unequal. It's not an equal system. This agreement does not have equality, so to speak. It lacks equality. It leans on one side more than the other. Why? Because of sovereignty, because of the potential compromise of sovereignty that is connected to this specific agreement. Now, I'm speaking in spiritual terms, I'm not speaking in physical terms. Because sovereignty is spiritual. Sovereignty is not physical. It is spiritual. So when nations come together and nations form an alliance, the alliance is based on these 7 dimensions. And those 7 dimensions, they determine the administration of the sovereignty of the nation. We'll continue with part 3. Next time, when we continue with part 4, when we talk about part 3, we'll be talking about our president as a mirror of the state of consciousness of the nation of Kenya. And we'll also be looking at him and the timeline he's brought us into, as far as the possible timelines of this nation is concerned and the possible destinies of this nation as well. God bless.